21 knots, sir.
James Cameron he's not just a director, he is part of Hollywood history. He is one of those event people. He is Cecile B DeMille. He is an inventor of the medium, and he's a progressor of the medium. Scientist, artist, engineer.
It's trying to communicate.
The thing about James Cameron is that he is obsessive in his filmmaking. He is very, very much involved in every aspect of the film. He could, if he wanted to, take over any individual department on the making of his film, from costume to special effects, and he could run that department. You know, he understands everything about making a film, and he can do it.
He is an extraordinary human being in many ways, because yes, he can be hugely despotic, almost tyrannical on set, because he insists on getting everything right. But he won't ask of his crew or his actors anything that he himself is not prepared to do.
First flight seals the bond. You cannot wait. Think, fly!
Fly?
James Cameron was born on the 16th of August 1954 in Kapuskasing, Ontario, Canada. He was the eldest of 5 children. His mother was a nurse and an artist, and his father was an electrical engineer.
The family moved when he was at the age of 4 to Chippewa, near the city of Niagara Falls, and James Cameron would grow up within hearing distance of the great waterfall and by the riversides there. And he would always be drawn to the waterfront, always been drawn to the movement of water and the flow of water. He said it filled his dreams.
From a very early age that he developed artistic interests. He liked painting, he liked drawing, he liked comics. His mother encouraged that, and also she took him on little geological expeditions as well. So he had a very early schooling or education in the natural world. All of this actually sort of engendered something in him which would come to fruition later in his life.
When he was 17, his family moved to California, where he finished high school and went to Fullerton College, where he initially studied physics and then switched to English, but neither of them really stuck, and he dropped out after a year and did a series of odd jobs around the college. He still lived around the college. He worked as a janitor there, he was a truck driver, and in the evenings he would look at other students' work or go in to look at classes where he was really learning about the techniques involved in special effects. So he would learn screen printing or model making. He would look at this, in effect, pulling together his own education. When Star Wars came out in 1977, he was ready. He went to Roger Corman's studio, which was the breeding ground for artists like George Lucas, and he showed them the work he'd done, the models, his drawings, and he was hired as a special effects guy. He worked on a number of science fiction films, Escape from New York, a film called Android, and eventually ended up on the sequel to Piranha, a film called Piranha 2, which was in a lot of trouble because the director and the producer were falling out. Eventually the director walked from the film and James Cameron ended up directing.
It was while in Rome, with no money, staying at some cheap hotel, and it was out of season, so it was pouring with rain. He got a fever. He got a terrible, probably what we would call the flu, and his temperature running high one night. And dreams are important in the world, James Cameron said. So many of his stories come from dreams. Right back, through his childhood, dreams fueled him. And he said he was feverish, he hadn't eaten enough, and he started to dream one night. And he saw this image of flames, and sort of almost apocalyptic. And out of these flames was crawling a sort of cyborg, half man, half robot. This great metallic skull, grin like death. And it was using what he thought was a kitchen knife to sort of pull itself forward. It had no legs. So it was using this kitchen knife to sort of pierce the ground and yank itself forward. Obviously incredibly hard, but this was a machine staying alive. And he immediately got up and started to draw the image down on must be hotel stationery or whatever he had to have. And then he started to write notes, things around it. Following day, he found some money in the street, he got himself a coffee, and he started to really think about, what is this thing? This is a story. And that was the Terminator, born in a feverish dream, and would be the robot that made his career.
This robotic assassin sent back from the future into the present to kill the mother of an unborn child who would be a revolutionary and would affect the future when machines took over from the human race. It was a complicated script, but it actually made perfect sense in terms of its sort of timing.
Originally, James Cameron's intention had been purely a blend of horror film and action film with a sci-fi underpinning. But there's certain moments when Schwarzenegger, for instance, is putting on the glasses and choosing which rude words to say, which add this slight seam of comedy, and I think lift the film up into something which moves it very rapidly into the classic status it has. I think it could have been a B movie, but it became an A movie, partly because of that chemistry between all of the different ingredients that happened thanks to the Schwarzenegger-Cameron, collaboration.
Within the fabric of this science fiction killer movie, something great was going on. I mean, there's the very famous scene where, and it's a functional scene, where the T-800 walks into a police station where Sarah Connor has been secured. And because he's a machine, he just walks up and goes, "Where is Sarah Connor?" And he's talking like an answer phone, that wonderful kind of rigid diction that Schwarzenegger has. And the policeman, valiantly says, "I can't tell you, get lost." And it's very famous, and he sort of, the brain cells, the kind of things are whirring inside the Terminator, and he says, "I'll be back." And he turns around, "I'll be back." He's going to get his car and going to smash it through the front. Because Schwarzenegger hated contractions. In his accent, kept saying to Cameron, "Can I say I will be back?" Cameron would not have it. No, "I'll be back." And it made him really nervous, Schwarzenegger. He just couldn't quite handle "I'll be back." It was very difficult for him. And there was something in that. He was thinking so hard about "I'll be back." It was fantastic.
"I'll be back."
It's one of the most famous lines in film history now. And it was done because he was so rigid with fear, I think, delivering the line. And it became funny and exciting. And it was the launch of this kind of killing spree that the machine goes on in the police station. And it just got cheers in the cinema. And that was the Terminator quality. This great ironic thing where we would cheer the bad guy, even though we knew he was the bad guy. And at the same time, what you might call the genius of Cameron was at work, because he made sure there was an emotional core. The story of Sarah Connor, the romance she has with Kyle Reese, that would result in the child that would save the future.
Cameron has this ability, really interesting early on, to take the mechanics of a sci-fi film that he's built as an engineer and put into it the humanity. And that becomes really what he's so superb at. He can do human relationships as well as big ideas and machines. Quite often you'll find those two things are quite hard to marry in a filmmaker, but that's something that he does better than anyone, and he does it right from the get-go.
In a funny way, he needs for his creative process to be a battle. He needs to be in the trenches. So he needs opposition to almost function and create. So I think he sets up obstacles for himself. But at the same time, this was a cheap film that they were trying to restrict the budget of. And his ideas were big, even on the level of the Terminator. The idea of showing the kind of the chassis, the skeleton, the endoskeleton underneath Arnold Schwarzenegger, Cameron felt was vital. So otherwise you were conning the viewer. And they just didn't want to do it. They were too expensive and too fussy. We'll end with the death of Schwarzenegger. And it's like, no, Cameron pushed and pushed. Sister, we have to see that great factory sequence at the end. You had to see the endoskeleton come after her. There's the image in his dream, this kind of death's head robot. He said, "I've got to show it." The red light just going out of his eye. And that's the imagery that we remember. But he had to fight. And I didn't forgive Medavoy and Daly for their tricks and games. And it was a learning curve. It's Hollywood. And Cameron was learning to be unstoppable, like his machine. He was learning to be a Terminator of directors.
Hey man, I don't want to rain on your parade. We're not going to last 17 hours. Those things are going to come in here just like they did before, and they're going to come in here, and they're going to come in here, and they're going to get us!
This little girl survived longer than that with no weapons and no training. Right?
Why don't you put her in charge?
You better just start dealing with it, Hudson. Listen to me.
After The Terminator was a great success, he came back with his terrific screenplay for Aliens. And even Walter Hill had to admit that it was something. Cameron says, and the deal is I direct. And there'd been a lot of kind of, well, you've done one film and all that kind of hesitancy. And it took the head of Fox to go, let's just get this thing done. This kid knows what he's doing. Terminator had been a huge hit at the box office. Let's get it done. Funnily enough, at this point, agents and various producers tried to talk Cameron out of doing Aliens because they said, oh, it's Ridley Scott, he'll get all the praise. You know, he did the first one, you're just the guy who did a sequel. But so dedicated was he to his screenplay and to the world of the film and what he wanted to do with it. Cameron said, no, I'm going to do it. I know how to do this film. And he really did.
Alien was such a classic film. It was, as they famously pitched it, Jaws in space. Very claustrophobic, very confined, about a creature that you hardly ever saw. Tiny bits of it in very different shapes would emerge and threaten and kill. It was incredibly terrifying, jumpy kind of horror film in space. And what James Cameron did was take that and just throw out a lot of it. His film is not tense, horror, quiet, stalking film. He decided that he would do, if you like, a merging of the war film and the science fiction film. So the beginning of the film, Sigourney Weaver, who's been in deep sleep, having escaped from the Nostromo, having defeated the alien, is rescued, and she discovers that while she's been asleep for the last 57 years, they have sent a colony back to the planet where they'd originally discovered the aliens, and the colony has lost contact with Earth. So there's a team of Marines who are going to find out what happened. Now, of course, Sigourney Weaver knows what happened, and she is constantly trying to tell everybody this is a terrible thing to do. What we need to do is nuke that planet from space. It is absolutely got to go. But as ever in the Alien franchise, there are plots and subplots and machinations going on around the back as people want to use the aliens for their own ends.
It is an absolutely amazing piece of work. It bears very little relation in its style to Ridley Scott's film. One of the problems with the filming was that Cameron was using a British crew, many of whom had actually worked on the original Alien, and they didn't like his style, so he had quite a tough time of it. But whatever happened, what emerged from the film itself is an absolutely wonderful piece of hardcore science fiction.
Ripley,
I don't want to hear about it, Bishop. She's alive. There's still time.
in 19 minutes, this area is going to be a cloud of vapor the size of Nebraska.
Hicks, don't let him leave.
We ain't going anywhere.
See you, Hicks.
Dwayne. It's Dwayne.
Ellen.
Whatever traumas he goes through to get there, the footage was astonishing. Arriving back with Brandywine and Walter Hill and David Giler, they were going, well, it's working. You know, look at it. It's so exciting. And that film is so exciting. There's the build-up of tension is just astonishingly well done. And Cameron has this gift. It's almost a kind of purity for telling a story on the move. So all those things that story has to do, characterization, exposition, dialogue, humor, the things that the ingredients of film are done as the plot moves along. It doesn't stop to do those things. There's very little place in the film where it pauses. It quietens at times, but it never stops. It's a propulsive film. And there's this great sequence, I don't know, about a third, maybe 45 minutes into the film, something like that, where the soldiers go into the nest for the first time. And it's a disaster. It's a trap. The aliens are dropping on them from everywhere. And it's a superlative bit of editing. You see the monitors where their kind of heartbeats turn to flat lines. Great image. But it's the moment where Ripley takes control. It's a fantastic sort of turning point in the film. And that's her character. And that's a Cameron moment, taking control. She kind of locks down Newt, gets the controls of the vehicle, this kind of Humvee-like kind of vehicle that crashes into things. And she gets the surviving Marines out of the nest. No one else does it. And that's the moment Ripley takes charge within the film. And from there, it's just terrifying, exciting, propulsive filmmaking. If Ridley Scott's film had been this kind of perfect haunted house story, eerie and terrifying, then this was the ultimate roller coaster. You couldn't breathe as you watched it, and it wouldn't let you off. As intense as it got, the next thing got more intense. And it was just a fantastic demonstration of action cinema.
You would think that by excessively showing it, by showing so many of them coming at you, that you would spoil the horror, spoil the thrill of the alien. But he's timed it so well, it doesn't matter. You just are absolutely on the edge of your seat. And because the alien as a creature is so slimy, and there's something about it that's really feeds into the id, there's something really terrifying. It's absolutely unsettling to watch all the way through. That war is not something that you celebrate the victories in. You're disturbed and appalled by what happens. Along the way, Sigourney Weaver rescues a girl, and so there's the vulnerability of Sigourney Weaver protecting this young girl all the way through as the heavily armed, heavily besuited Marines are essentially wiped out one after the other, until eventually you're left with this mother figure, Sigourney Weaver, in a huge mechanized suit taking on the mother alien. And it's a very much, again, something that Cameron enjoys in his films, is realizing, emphasizing the power of the female leader, the female warrior. This is something that becomes more and more present in his films, and Sigourney Weaver is the really the prime example of this. This woman who single-handedly takes on a planet full of aliens, and it's absolutely breathtaking sequence of film.
Going over the wall, coming to bearing 065. Flatbed, you online?
10-4 Lindsay, we read you loud and clear. Starting our descent. Divers, how you doing?
Everybody's okay so far.
Hang on, boys. It's all downhill from here.
The Abyss was a film that Cameron had been wanting to make for many, many years. In fact, he had the original idea when he was 17. This took him not into space, but into the depths of the ocean. He'd always been interested in the planet itself and actually exploring the other dimension of the deep.
It is a group of people, half oil rig workers, half Navy SEALs, who are sent deep into the ocean to rescue a US nuclear submarine which has 192 warheads on it and is gone down just off the coast of Cuba. So there is a great threat to world peace if this is discovered. They have to make sure it's safe. As they go down into the abyss, they become aware of this incredible collection of lights and sounds, something entirely alien that is there at the bottom of the ocean. And they come across an alien species that has basically been at the bottom of the ocean for a long time.
One by one, the scientists sort of dive, using this liquid oxygen, dive down, and are never heard from until the end of the story. The last one goes over the edge. That was the fundamental basis of what he wanted to do with The Abyss. And now, with the power of having had 2 hit science fiction films in a row, he told Fox, the studio who'd done Aliens for, he said, I want to do this film, The Abyss, and I'm going to shoot it underwater. I mean, you're taken aback. Sure, there's ways we can fake this, there's special effects we can do. He said, no, for this film to work, because I want it to work, we have to shoot it underwater.
Just listen to me for 1 second. Now, you've got the suit on, and you're a much better swimmer than I am, right?
Yeah, maybe.
Right? Yes! So I've got a plan.
What's the plan?
I drown and you tow me back to the rig.
No! No!
Yes, this water!
No!
Only a couple of degrees above freezing. I go into deep hypothermia. My blood will go like ice water. Right? My body systems will slow down. They won't stop.
Cameron wanted to film a lot of it actually underwater. He didn't want to use CGI effects in the water or the normal things. And he found an enormous tank in Carolina, which was a former half-completed nuclear facility. This created all kinds of problems because it was so huge, it actually had its own meteorological conditions. They used real divers, but actually most of the stunts in the film, including the really dangerous ones, were performed by the actors themselves. This caused all kinds of problems because both Ed Harris and indeed James Cameron nearly drowned in the course of actually making it when things went wrong. Just about everybody on the film said it was really, really difficult to make, and very few of them actually will talk about it at any great length, even now.
This is where he starts to become incredibly bankable because he got everything. He's got everything the audience is looking for. Special effects, huge adventures, but real heart. And so The Abyss actually often doesn't get given the respect it deserves. It was a huge success financially. It was a very, very, very successful film, and also a pioneering film in terms of the way it used its technology. and a great film in watching the way Cameron's career develops, but also the film in which you understand this is a great director who's really got, you know, who is the son of an engineer and of an artist, and he's bringing them both together to make this.
You get that other side of Cameron, that obsessive side of him. When he directs, he is in the zone, he is in the film. Michael Biehn described it beautifully. He said, Cameron doesn't have an ego. The film has an ego, and you can't get anywhere around it. The film is everything. And it's like going to war. It's an obsessiveness. It's General Jim, you know, when he was a kid, running through the forest, doing the big things. He is in charge. And it's that Roger Corman thing. If I don't do it, then no one will do it. And if people aren't being like they are, like he is, if you aren't like James Cameron, he gets annoyed with you and infuriated. Why can't you all be like me? Why can't everybody on the production be like me? That's where those furies come from. Because it's the film. He wants the film to be so special.
Hi, Bigman.
Hi, Mrs. Bigman.
Hey! You're not supposed to be here!
Terminator 2 was a follow-up to his first film, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger as a cyborg, but this time a sort of heroic side in the role of feisty heroine. It turned out to be an enormous hit.
Where in the previous film, there was a human being who came back to help Sarah Connor. In this case, it's Arnold Schwarzenegger, the robot, coming back to save her from a far superior, technologically advanced robot. Now, the new robot is made out of liquid metal. And you can see the special effects from Abyss being deployed again in this film, because the robot that they're fighting against flows. If you shoot him, the bullet goes through, it opens up and it closes down. So there's all sorts of amazing special effects in this film.
It kind of takes the dramatic idea and intensifies it. Because the central relationship now is not Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese. The central relationship is a Terminator and his boy. It's the Terminator who becomes a father figure to the boy. And the relationship that develops between them. Edward Furlong who plays the young John Connor. He's got great chemistry with Schwarzenegger. And Schwarzenegger does this idea, and it's Cameron again, where because his neural net processor has been switched on, he can learn through the film. So the boy will teach him how to be a human. He's teaching a machine human values. Pure Cameron idea. Meanwhile, Sarah Connor, who was vital to the whole equation, had to be in a different place. Cameron called up Linda Hamilton and said, I'm doing Terminator 2. You know, and she said, well, no, I don't want to do it. She had a hard time in the first film, and she kind of knew what James Cameron was all about. And she just said something to him. She went, I'm only going to do this if she's crazy. I mean, she's really crazy. He kind of stopped and listened to her and wait there. And so he goes away and says, well, of course. She knew that the machines would turn on mankind. She'd seen evidence of this lethal future. She knew Judgment Day was coming, nuclear war. That will turn anybody mad. So he got back on the phone and said, here's the plot. Yeah, John Connor sends a good Terminator to rescue his boy. They come and save Sarah Connor, who's in an insane asylum. She went, we're in, we're done. And that became the story.
Terminator 2 was a massive hit. It dies as something that would go on forever. It was, you know, very rarely do you get sequels this powerful.
It almost seemed preordained that it would become the biggest film of all time. It arrived like an eruption, that film. It was almost late, but he got it done. It was right for the last minute, special effects being done. But that film just happened. And it was so much fun and so clever and so propulsive. I wonder whether he's actually never bettered it. I think it may be the apotheosis. That and Aliens are so well put together. And it has this strange power. And it's the power of cinema that we cry for a Terminator. We cry for a washing machine, this thing going down at the end into the molten metal. and Schwarzenegger, and you're there, and that's what you can do. That's the gift of a great director. He plays with you and toys with you, and it made unspeakably large amounts of money, and Cameron now was unstoppable.
Hey, Harry, watch 20, Harry!
Westbound from the park. Suspect is on a motorcycle and is coming out on Franklin.
Copy that.
Okay, I want you on 14th in case he turns south. And I want 7 on the north side to box him in. Okay, I'll make it quick because my horse is getting tired.
Your horse?
True Lies is an action-adventure film, and it was meant a slight departure for James Cameron. This one is a kind of almost comic spy film starring Arnold Schwarzenegger as ostensibly a man leading a double life.
It's the story of a spy who's happily married. His wife doesn't know he's a spy. She thinks he's a computer salesman. And he goes off and does these ludicrous action adventures to save America from threats, and then comes home and tries to live the normal everyday life. His wife starts to be wooed by Bill Paxton, who's a used car salesman, who pretends he's a spy to try to get Jamie Lee Curtis into bed. And so this all sort of draws together into the overarching plot, which is a group of terrorists trying to nuke America with a bomb on the Florida Keys. The film is outlandish and preposterous.
Come on, baby.
Cameron strategized this stunt where the wife character, Jamie Lee Curtis, would be trapped in a limousine and her husband would be leaning out of a chopper above her, trying to get her out before the limousine goes off the edge and the bomb goes off. But it's all along this incredible kind of ribbon-like freeway. And Cameron was going to do the whole thing from helicopters. And he said to Jamie Lee Curtis, and she is so gutsy and so brilliant in the film, he said, I need you to be plucked out of the limo. I don't need a stunt woman. I need you to be seen. And she went, well, where are you going to be? Well, I'm doing this very dangerous stunt. He goes, I'm going to be leaning out of the helicopter, grabbing your hand. I'm going to have the camera. I'm going to be right there. And she went, okay, we'll do it. And he's as good as his word. The guy leaning out of the chopper, holding the camera, is James Cameron. And they are sort of feet away from one another. And if you watch the film, it's a fabulous moment.
They've got you trapped, Rose. And you're going to die if you don't break free. Maybe not right away because you're strong, but sooner or later, that fire that I love about you, Rose, that fire is gonna burn out.
It's not up to you to save me, Jack.
You're right. Only you can do that.
Titanic is not the first film to be made about RMS Titanic, but it is the biggest and the best. Cameron was so intent on making sure that the details and the facts, not only of the ship itself, but also the disaster, were accurate, that he died. He went down in a submersible 12 times to the actual wreck of the Titanic, which he filmed. And some of that footage is actually used in the film. He takes this sort of thing very seriously. He really is a kind of not just a filmmaker, but a sort of oceanographer as well. And he managed to use all that information that he brought back to create a film that, frankly, has to be seen to be believed.
James Cameron's career is now approaching the level where each film he makes is the highest grossing film since the last film that he made. And Titanic is the highest grossing film. It's a huge hit, and it's such a huge hit because he makes it so well. The story of the Titanic is one that we all know. So we know what happened to the ship. It sailed, got hit by an iceberg, it went down. How can you make that story compelling and interesting? And he does this very cleverly by actually telling you the story of the sinking in the first 10 minutes of the film.
He was going to do it as realistically as possible. He was going to put us on the Titanic and through the trauma of the sinking. He was going to be unstinting in his depiction of those events. They're virtually real time in the film. But also he was going to do it through the framework of an epic romance. Something like Gone with the Wind, something like Dr. Zhivago, a big-scale, sentimental movie. And as he pitched it to 20th Century Fox, I'm going to do Romeo and Juliet on the Titanic. That's why he's clever. That's why he's brilliant, because he frames the epic with the intimate. He marries them together. And he knew it had to be almost a corny romance because of what he was going to throw them through.
When the ship is finally hit by the iceberg, because it can hit the top speed, but when it's traveling so fast it can't turn, so the ship owner has doomed the passengers, then James Cameron just shows us the human tragedy. He spends his time exploring all the different layers of the ship. He's shown us them at the beginning with, a beautiful set of sequences where he shows us the staterooms, he shows us the steerage, he shows us everything. And then he shows us how the water affects all the social classes, all the different people. He's making quite a political point in this as well. He's talking a lot about class, both in the beginning and at the end of the film, about how if you were poor, you would be locked in to die, essentially, by the ship-owning people, so that the wealthy could man the lifeboats. It's a very, very dark, bitter sequence, and it ends in the icy seas in this just appalling, terrifying moment as the ship goes down and you watch people drawn down after it. It is a triumph of filmmaking. It really is an astonishing piece of work. But as I say, particularly because he's told you what you're about to see. And yet when you see it, your heart is in your mouth. He's just so clever in that way. Here's what I'm going to show you. Watch that, now you're almost in tears. I mean, how many filmmakers can do that?
It would end up making $2 billion at the box office. Absolute industry-changing thing. But I think for him, it must have been proving himself right, showing people. The fact he'd stuck with his film, that he'd fought his way to the end, that he'd made the Titanic he wanted to make, and it had spoken to people in such a deep way. That is what was going to be satisfying to James Cameron. And then the Oscars came along. All these nominations. It was the sensation. And it won 11. It was tied with Ben-Hur for the most amount of wins any one film had got. And that included, obviously, Best Picture and Best Director for Cameron. And you can't argue. That film is him. He pulled that film together with willpower and made it work. He envisioned his giant set sinking and tilted. He envisioned those incredible sequences, the back of the sterns tipping up like that, and bodies falling down. He was filming it, and he was there with them. That's James Cameron. And he gets up on stage and he shouts, "I'm king of the world." And he admitted it was a bit of a moment where he kind of let go a bit. But I think all that relief and all that sense of fulfillment came out. And he said, "I've made a fool of myself in front of billions, but what the heck? I made Titanic. Who's going to argue? He was king of the world."
Now there's something you don't see every day.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Jake?
Nuclear reflex is good.
Pin response normal. How you feeling, Jake?
Hey, guys.
Having spent the intervening years making documentaries, Cameron returned to feature filmmaking with Avatar. Avatar was a long-held dream project, and he was waiting for technology to advance to the extent that he could get the kind of effects that he wanted. Of course, he was contributing to the development of this technology himself all the way.
Sam Worthington is a Marine who has had his legs blown off, and his twin brother has been part of this mission out in space. He goes, because he's got the same genetic coding, he's enabled to use the technology that his brother was using, which is attached to the DNA of the user. They found a planet which has enormous raw material resources, which is peopled by very gentle people called the Na'vi, who are tall and blue, elegant, graceful. But the planet itself is so hostile to breathing, the living, being human, that you can't even go down in a spacesuit. What happens is the Marines are based on the moon, and they send down these genetically grown versions of the Na'vi, which are connected to Marines back on the moon. Effectively, they're drones. They are organic, moving drone vehicles, which resemble the Na'vi.
It was all about creating a reality. There was a software system called Massive, which kind of could grow things. So you planted little programs within the screen, and you let a kind of evolution take hold. You gave it its qualities. It would expand like this, or it would twine around things, or whatever it would do. So you could leave it and grow a whole forest on a computer. And this would be the environment that we would see. This would be the forests of Pandora. Extraordinary place. Like this kind of far-fetched prog rock album covers. It had this kind of dream-like sensibility. But the actors themselves would do everything by motion capture. And that meant being dressed in these lycra grey suits covered in sensors and a small camera rig to cover their faces, and this kind of grey warehouse studio environment. And they would have to pretend to be on Pandora. They'd pretend to do the film. But they found it liberating. Something that really surprised Cameron was how quickly they got into it, because it was about imagination. And because he had this sort of facility of moving within anywhere he wanted to go, within the volumes, they call it, within this environment, there was less worry about cameras and camera placement and blocking. The old traditions were sort of thrown out. So the actors were liberated to move where they wanted, to be free. So there was actually a freeing quality to motion capture that let them loose. And this created a great sense of fluidity in the film. It's a wonderful film for motion. It's a travelling through this environment. It's so thick and verdant around you. It's kind of present.
Brother, please, do not attack the Sky people. Many of Matakaya will die if you do. You are not my brother! And I am not your enemy!
It's a film that has a great heart. It has political impact and import, and at the same time is also a romance. But at the heart of it is this conflict between colonization, hardware, and scientific and technological progress and its impact on the natural world. Okay, we're on an alien planet. It's not natural to us, but it is to the Pandorians. And I think that this shows Cameron at his most conscience-driven. This is a film that is driven by his own conscience about the way the planet is going.
By the end of it, when Sam Worthington comes to the realization that the exploitation of this planet is morally indefensible, because we've fallen in love with the planet and its people alongside him, we're on board. I mean, it's a David Attenborough-style piece of preaching about saving the world. It's an amazing piece of filmmaking. And this is, I suppose, the highlight of the way that James Cameron tells stories, is to use extreme technology to make very intense emotional human points. And that's what Avatar is. It's the most expensive, the most ambitious of all his projects, but it is the most successful of all his projects because he keeps topping his own box office records. You know, it's a phenomenal hit. And I mean, this is a man who's, you know, appropriately for the man who made Terminator, this is a man who's unstoppable.
You know that what Cameron is really getting to is a sense of a new frontier and a new possibility for filmmaking, because CGI has become a problem. It's become monotonous and it's used to do too many easy things. It's used as a quick fix, and it's become rather wearing in films, and we don't believe anymore. And you just know that Cameron, with these Avatar sequels, is trying to reinvent CGI or take us somewhere new, take us to a level of detail that will be beyond compare. And I just know, because he never seems to let us down, that these films will be phenomenal because it's James Cameron at the helm, and he won't let anything else happen other than that they are phenomenal.
Well, I guess I better go. I don't want to be late for my own party.
The fascinating thing about Cameron, at the end of the day, he's not just a filmmaker. He is he's an inventor. He is in the forefront of technological research. He is an environmentalist. He is an explorer, and he's just as interested in going down into the depths of the ocean. He's one of the very few men to have explored the Mariana Trench, for example, and filmed it, as he is in distant planets and the possibility of life on Mars. He has got a big mind, and now, of course, he has, in the space of really a handful of films which have made extravagant amounts of money, he now has the resources to actually explore it himself and actually contribute to the continued exploration of the possibilities of helping the planet and the environment.
James Cameron understands the story of the 20th and 21st century, and he knows how to tell that story. What his films are about is the thing that scares us all most of the time, which is the post-war fear of technology and machinery, which is absolutely inescapably undefeatable. Now, that's really at the heart of his mythology, if you like. From the Terminator to the Marines, going down, the heavily armed Marines to these aliens. It's always these things that you cannot defeat, that will crush us. And we live in an age where that is the threat. We're terrified of AI. What will happen when AI becomes sentient? Will it kill us all? Will it wipe us all out? He understands that is the thing. We are creating things that we don't understand, and we're creating things that we're afraid we won't be able to control. It's it's a story that really, in a way, is as old as the Golem in Prague. It's as old as these Czechoslovakian fears, these stories of things that will come at you. It is a horror story. But what he knows is that we have our own version of it. And the faith that we have in technology, in the Titanic, for instance, and the terror we have of technology are this thing that we're constantly caught between. We love it, we want it, we hate it, we're afraid of it. And he knows that. And he knows that in the middle there's human beings, soft, squishy human beings, who for all of this technology around them, they still love each other, and they still hate each other, and they still want things, and they still really just want to be with someone they love.
James Cameron is the most successful artist of all time. No one comes anywhere near close to him for how successful he has been at what he does. I mean, it is, beyond belief, although it's real, what he has achieved in terms of getting bodies into cinemas. Is incredible. It beats the Beatles, it beats Spielberg, it beats all those kind of totems we put up as the great sort of measures of success. James Cameron is like an entire industry in one person, entire nation in one person. Yet he's something of an outlier, he's something of an exile, an outsider to Hollywood. He's almost bigger than Hollywood. But every time he turns up, the world stops in their tracks, and we all go and see the latest James Cameron film.
The King of the High Sea, live in New York. Pavarotti in Central Park is new from Sky Arts.